All right, welcome back to the deep dive. This time we are diving deep into how you can learn English with friends.
Yes.
So if you are a language learner who is at an intermediate to advanced level,
Mm-hmm.
then this is the perfect episode for you because we are going to be breaking down some of those really tricky phrases and idioms and all the things that might trip you up even if you have pretty good English.
Yeah. Like, even if you are watching with subtitles and think you understand what's going on,
Yeah,
you might not be picking up on all the nuances. And FunFluent, of course, is a great tool to help with this.
absolutely. So FunFluent, if you guys haven't heard of it yet, I'll tell you, it's amazing. It's like having subtitles, but that actually explain the jokes and the grammar.
Yeah.
All those cultural references, it's a game changer.
It is. It's amazing.
But we're going deeper today. We're going to look at the first episode of Friends.
Yes.
And we're going to really break down all of those tricky expressions.
Exactly.
So let's start with idioms.
Okay, great.
Why don't you tell us about some of the first ones that come up?
Okay, so the first one we have is shoot for the stars. And Ross's parents say this to him. They say, look, there are people like Ross who need to shoot for the stars.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, they don't mean this literally, right?
No.
They are not saying Ross needs to go into space. They are using this as a metaphor
Yeah.
to say, you're an ambitious person. You need to follow your dreams, set high goals.
Like, go for it. Don't be afraid to dream big.
Yeah, aim high. Exactly.
Okay. What about roll with the punches?
Yeah.
This one comes up when Barry is trying to sort of, let's say, soften the blow of leaving Rachel at the altar.
Right.
He says, things change. Roll with the punches.
Mm-hmm. And this is such a great idiom because, it's really about being flexible and going with the flow.
Yeah.
Like, life is going to throw things at you. It's not always going to go according to plan.
Yeah.
And you just have to adapt and you have to just kind of go with it.
Roll with it.
Roll with it.
Okay, well, speaking of unexpected things in life, how about leave a man at the altar?
Oh, yeah.
That is a pretty big one.
Yeah.
Monica's mom says about Rachel, well, at least she had the chance to leave a man at the altar.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously that means to abandon someone right before the wedding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jilt them. Leave them standing there.
What a way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a pretty dramatic idiom, right?
It is. And you can just imagine the emotions involved.
Wow.
It's a huge decision.
Huge life change.
Mm.
Okay, so then we have this line that Monica says about Ross. As far as my parents are concerned, Ross can do no wrong.
Oh, yeah. The golden child.
Right. So the idiom is do no wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously in real life, nobody's perfect.
Of course. Of course.
So what does that really mean?
So this is really about being seen as, like, practically perfect, especially in somebody's eyes. So, their parents.
Yeah, yeah. Like the favorite.
Yeah, like the favorite.
The one who can't make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. 2 more idioms I want to look at from this episode.
Right.
One is borders on. Ross, when he is talking about Carol and the baby, he says, I think that borders on child abuse. When he's talking about the ridiculously long name that they are coming up with.
Yeah.
Then we also have steer clear, which Rachel advises Ross to steer clear of the word dumped.
Right. Good advice.
So what are those 2 idioms all about?
Okay, so borders on means to be very close to something, usually something negative, like
Yeah.
almost crossing a line.
Okay.
So in this case, Ross is kind of using hyperbole to say that the name is so bad that it's practically harmful to the baby,
Yeah.
like almost child abuse.
I mean, poor kid with that name, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody wants to be stuck with Helen Willock Bunch Geller.
Oh, that's a mouthful.
And steer clear. What about that one?
Steer clear basically means to avoid something completely.
Hmm.
Like stay away from or avoid at all costs. And in this case, Rachel is warning Ross to be sensitive to Barry's feelings and not use that word.
Oh, yeah, because he's already feeling pretty sensitive after being left at the altar.
Exactly. So, it's all about being careful with your words, especially in those kind of delicate situations.
Right, right. Okay, so we've looked at a few idioms,
Mm-hmm.
but, friends wouldn't be friends without those phrasal verbs.
Definitely not.
Those are always tripping people up. So we've got a whole bunch of those coming up.
Yeah, so stay tuned. We're going to unpack those next.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's tackle some of those tricky phrasal verbs.
Yes, let's do it.
So first up, we have bring back.
Okay.
And Joey says this when he is giving his friend some dating advice. And he says, word of advice, bring back the comedian.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, he doesn't mean literally bring back a stand-up comedian.
Right. He's not talking about a literal comedian.
Exactly. So what does he mean in this context?
Well, I think he's saying, like, bring back the fun, bring back that playful energy into the relationship.
Yeah. Like reintroduce that element of humor and lightheartedness.
Exactly.
Yeah. So bring back, bring back to a previous state.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, what about sit through?
Sit through. Okay.
So Joey uses this one when I guess he's kind of being a little bit mean about kissing.
Oh, yeah.
He compares it to the stand-up comedian you have to sit through before Pink Floyd comes out.
Right. The warm-up act.
So what does sit through mean in this context?
So sit through really means to endure something,
Uh-huh.
something that is unpleasant or boring, usually. And you have to, like, experience it from beginning to end. You can't escape.
You're stuck there.
You're stuck.
Okay, and I guess in his mind, kissing is like the boring opening act, and, whatever comes next is the main event.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Let's move on to Go Down. This one appears when Rachel is having, well, a bit of a meltdown about the engagement ring. And Monica's trying to calm her down, and she says,
No.
or, hey, I'll go down there, and I'll give Barry back his ring.
Okay, so go down. It can have a few different meanings.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's pretty straightforward. She just means to go to a location. She's going to go to Barry's place.
So not going downstairs or anything like that.
No, not in this case.
Just going somewhere.
Exactly.
All right, how about wind up?
Hmm.
This one comes up when Ross is explaining Carol's situation to his friends. He's talking about the baby's name,
Yes.
and he says he knows no one is going to say all those names. He knows they'll wind up calling her Geller. Then he gets his way.
Mm-hmm. So wind up means to end up in a certain situation, often kind of unexpectedly.
Yeah, like a consequence that you didn't really plan.
Exactly. So yeah, despite this crazy long name, they'll probably just end up calling her Geller.
Right. Okay, and then we have stick in and get involved.
Yes.
So we've got Barry saying to Rachel, but you hate sticking your finger in your eye. He's talking about the contact lenses.
Mm.
And she's like, not for her, meaning Carol.
Right.
And then we also have Ross telling his friends, well, Carol says she and Susan want me to be involved, talking about the baby.
Yes.
So what are those two all about?
Okay, so stick in very literally just means to insert something, into a particular place.
Right. And in this case, it's putting in a contact lens.
Yeah, very literal.
Okay. And
Yeah.
to get involved.
Yeah, get involved is much more about participation.
Mhm.
It means to be a part of something.
Okay.
And Carol wants Ross to be a part of the baby's life, to be involved in raising the baby.
Okay. Makes sense. And last but not least, we have give back.
Oh, yeah.
So throughout this episode, there's all this talk of Rachel returning the engagement ring. And finally, Barry is like, I guess this belongs to you. And she's like, well, thank you for giving it back.
Yeah. So give back, very simply, means to return something.
Yeah.
To its owner. But of course, in this case, the ring is so symbolic. It represents their relationship.
Yeah, the end of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just a simple phrase, but it carries a lot of weight in this context.
Right. Okay, so we've covered some phrasal verbs, but now we're moving into those culturally specific phrases.
Yes.
Which, for me, I think are some of the most fun parts of Friends. Because it's like, how do you explain that to someone who doesn't understand American culture?
Right.
So, for example, we have the infamous ugly naked guy.
Yeah.
Now, we never actually see this guy.
Right. He's never shown on screen.
So tell me more about him.
Okay. So he's this character who lives across the street from Monica and Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
And we constantly hear these funny stories and observations about him from the friends.
Yeah. Like he's almost like a character, even though we never meet him.
Exactly. He's part of their world, their daily lives.
And he does all sorts of crazy things.
Oh, yeah.
Like in this episode, we find out he has a thigh master.
Yes. Monica says, ugly naked guy got a thigh master.
What even is a thigh master?
Well, it was this piece of exercise equipment, very popular in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of a funny, pop culture reference.
Yeah, it's very specific to that time period.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's just this constant source of amusement and gossip for them.
Okay. So besides the ugly naked guy, are there any other phrases that we should be aware of that might be confusing to someone who's not familiar with American culture?
Yeah, there are a few. So, for example, there's the scene where Ross is talking to Rachel, and he says, how about I'll catch up with you in the Ice Age?
Yeah, what's that all about?
So, obviously, he's not literally talking about the Ice Age.
Right.
He's using it figuratively to mean a very long time.
Yeah.
Like, I'll see you never.
Right.
But it's a funny way of expressing, his frustration.
Okay.
And then there's also a scene where Ross, Carol, and Susan are looking at the sonogram of the baby. And Ross kind of jokes. He says, I don't know, but I think it's about to attack the Enterprise.
The Enterprise.
Yeah. So here he's referencing the starship from Star Trek.
Yeah.
So it's a pop culture reference.
Okay.
And, Star Trek is this huge cultural phenomenon, very popular in the U.S.
Okay, so if you didn't know Star Trek, you wouldn't get that joke.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, and then this one's a little weird.
Yeah.
We have the mastodon smell.
Oh, yes.
Now, what does a mastodon smell?
So a mastodon is this extinct animal, kind of like a woolly mammoth.
Okay.
And when Joey says he's out banging other women over the head with a club while she sits at home trying to get the mastodon smell out of the carpet, he's obviously exaggerating.
Yeah.
It's a hyperbole.
Right. And he's implying that, like, prehistoric men had a really strong, unpleasant odor.
Yeah.
I guess it's funny because you're just imagining, like, this really ancient, strong smell.
Exactly. Like something that's been there for centuries.
Okay, last one, and then we'll move on. We have the word doy.
Oh, doy. Okay.
Phoebe says it to Rachel. She says, doy, probably right before she lost it. Talked about the engagement ring.
Yeah.
Then she's like, you don't get a lot of Dewey these days.
Doy. It's kind of like saying duh.
Oh.
Or, like obvious. Like, it's so obvious.
Okay.
So it's kind of a sarcastic term, implying that Rachel's question was really obvious.
Okay, so it's like, come on, you should have known that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've covered idioms, phrasal verbs, these culturally specific phrases, but there's still more. There are some sentences in this episode that I think on the surface level seem very simple. But if you really understand the context and the character's motivations, you realize they have much deeper meanings.
Exactly.
So let's dive into those.
All right, so those sentences with a little bit more to them than meets the eye.
Yeah, exactly. So one that really stood out to me is when Ralph is talking about the baby's name. And he says, he knows no one's going to say all those names. He knows they'll wind up calling her Geller. Then he gets his way. So it seems like he's just talking about the name, but what's really going on there?
Well, I think it's more than just the name, right? I mean, you have to remember Ross is going through a lot emotionally.
Yeah.
I mean, his wife has left him for another woman. She's pregnant with his child. And he's kind of feeling a bit lost and powerless in all of this.
Oh, he wants to be involved.
Exactly. And so by coming up with this ridiculously long name, he's almost trying to assert some control in a way, Like he knows that people are going to shorten it, and he's okay with that because then it's almost like he got his way,
It's like a little victory for...
Exactly, yeah. It's a small way of feeling like he's still a part of this whole process.
Okay. What about the line where Ross says, I don't think I can be involved in this particular family thing. Now, on the surface, it sounds like he's just saying, I don't want to be involved.
Right.
But again, there's more to it, right?
There is. I mean, think about his tone of voice when he says it. He sounds hesitant.
Yeah.
Almost like he's pushing Carol away.
Yeah.
Even though she's asking for his support.
Right.
So I think this really shows us that he's still hurt. He's still processing the breakup. And maybe he's a little bit scared of getting hurt again.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the last sentence I wanted to look at is from Rachel.
Okay.
She has just lost the engagement ring in the lasagna.
Oh, no.
And she says, see, I wrote a note to myself, then I didn't need it. So I balled it up, and now I wish I was dead.
Well, that escalated quickly.
Yeah, she's being a bit dramatic, but it's more than just about the ring, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, she's obviously freaking out because it's an engagement ring and it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But I think it's also about, all the regret and the confusion that she's feeling at that moment.
Yeah.
Like, she made this big decision to leave Barry, thinking that it was the right thing to do. But now she's facing the consequences of that decision.
Yeah. Like her whole life has been turned upside down.
Exactly. And the ring kind of represents, her old life. And now it's lost.
Oh, yeah.
And she's just feeling completely overwhelmed and lost.
Okay, so we've covered idioms, phrasal verbs, cultural references, and now these sentences that have kind of like hidden meanings.
Right.
And I think anyone out there learning English with friends, they can really benefit from looking at all these layers of language.
Absolutely. And, there are so many other little things in this episode as well. Like, Just those small phrases or comments that the characters make that really add to their personalities.
Yeah, yeah. What were some of your favorites?
Well, like when Rachel finds out that Barry is with Mindy and she says, oh, but he needed the plugs, he needed the glasses. That's so Rachel.
It is. It's her using humor to kind of cope with a difficult situation.
Exactly.
Right, right.
Or, Chandler's classic line, must pee.
Yes. So simple, but so funny.
So Chandler. And even, like Ross's awkward, good shake, good shake.
Right.
When he's talking to Susan.
Yeah. Or when Rachel finds out about Ross and Mindy's trip and she's like, you went on our honeymoon alone.
Yes. All those little moments.
All the little things.
Yeah.
So to wrap up, I mean, if you're out there using Friends to improve your English, what's the key takeaway from all of this?
I would say, don't just focus on individual words. Pay attention to how the language is being used, idioms, the phrasal verbs, those cultural references. That's where the real learning happens.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to use tools like FunFluent to help you along the way.
Exactly. I mean, FunFluent makes it so much easier to understand all those jokes and those cultural nuances that we've been talking about.
Right. So as we leave this episode, what's something that you would like our listeners to think about?
Well, I would say as you continue watching Friends, think about how all these language elements that we've discussed, how they contribute to the humor and the character development. How does understanding them make the show even more enjoyable for you?
That's a great question to ponder. So keep watching, keep learning, and keep using FunFluent to get the most out of your Friends experience.
Absolutely. Until next time, happy watching.
And we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.